everyone, and welcome to today's video on push style plumbing fittings. These are commonly referred to as SHARKEBITEs. SHARKEBITE is just a brand, but there are many different brands that you can buy. The key is these are some of the easiest style fittings that you will come across when it comes to making solid plumbing connections. Some of the tools that you're going to need to work on this, obviously you're going to need your Z871 safety glasses, as we need in all of our safety applications. Tape measure for measuring your proper length of pipe or tubing that you're working with. If you're working with PEX, you're going to want a PEX style cutter, or if you're working with PVC, a PVC style cutter. If you're working with copper, you would want a copper tubing cutter. And then if you plan on removing these fittings afterwards, you're going to want some sort of push fitting remover. So this is a different style remover. They make little clips that will clip on and depress this ring, which we'll talk about when we look at removing these. In this case, we have a little prong style that we can utilize to remove these fittings as well. How these fittings differ is these fittings differ from traditional copper fittings in that there's no other filler material that's required. They simply push on to make the connection. And when you look inside the fittings, you'll see that they have little fingers that actually grab the pipe. So this inner plastic piece will actually slide inside the pipe, and then there's little fingers that actually grab the outside of the pipe to make sure that this does not get removed or can be removed easily once it's installed. There's a little rubber O-ring in there that's doing all of the work of sealing the pipe itself from whatever media is in there. So whether it's water or air, the O-ring does most of the work. When working with these push style connections, one of the big advantages with these style connections is you can use a multitude, or they can be used across a multitude of different pipes. So for instance, I can use them with PEX, I can use them with copper, and we can use them with some other pipes as well. The nice thing is we can transition from these two. So for instance, I could start with copper and come out with PEX. So a lot of times these are used for retrofit applications in older homes where the home may have been copper style plumbing that we're then transitioning to PEX. When you start working with this, obviously you got to make sure your safety is all set. So your Z871 safety glasses are on at all times while you're working with this. It doesn't seem like a very harmful application, but sometimes when you're cutting or working with anything, you never know when something could fly up at your eyes. So we're going to make sure our safety glasses are on. In making these connections, one of the first things you're often doing is making your cut. So one of the critical things you need to make sure is that you have a nice square cut. So when we look at this cut's at a heavy angle. You want to make sure that your cuts are nice and square. So to do that, we're going to start with a nice, fresh, square cut. Make that cut. We are now square to this. All right. Same thing would apply if we're using our copper. If we're working with copper, you want to make sure this joint is deburred, or excuse me, this cut is deburred, right? So we're going to deburr this just to make sure that that O-ring doesn't get pierced and that that has a nice solid connection. So we'll get that deburred. That's nice and clean. Our PEX is nice and clean. And then to make the joint, it's as simple as making sure that little white plastic piece goes inside of the pipe, right? And you'll notice I just put that on, it comes right off. So you got to get this placed, and then it's pushing this fitting until it bottoms out completely. You also should not be able to remove this fitting by hand. So that fitting's installed, it's bottomed out. Occasionally what we can do is we could measure, if we go to their data, measure the distance it takes of what this should actually sink onto the pipe, make a mark on our pipe, and then when we apply this joint, we would know that we're completely buried into that at the correct depth. So we'll show you on the PEX side of things now. So once again, we have this copper joint made, PEX. We're going to get that inserted so that the white is in the center, and we'll work this until that bottoms out completely. The nice thing is these joints can still rotate after the fact, as it's the O-ring inside that's doing most of the work on the sealing process. The fingers are holding these joints, they're nice and solid. In the event that we want to remove this, let's say you're doing a temporary application, or perhaps you need to change something down the road, whatever it might be, these fittings are probably the easiest style fitting besides black pipe to remove. just because there's no desoldering. We don't have to thread anything. It's simply taking this tannish ring that's here and depressing that ring down, which allows us to then pull this pipe out. So that tannish ring, when we slide that down, will actually release those little fingers, which are like Chinese finger traps. So when we release those fingers, we can then pull this pipe out. So I'll show you on our style here. We have a 1 inch, 3/4, and 1/2 inch depression in here, where we can basically slide this tool on, depress that ring, and we should be able to slide our PEX right out of there, okay? The same thing could apply if we needed to remove it from the copper. Once again, we can slide this on, depress this ring, and slide the copper joint, or excuse me, slide the push fitting right off of the copper pipe. If we take a look at the copper pipe, we can see where those little Chinese finger traps or the little fingers actually grabbed onto that copper pipe. There's little indentations. So that's what's actually doing the work to hold the fitting on. Thanks for watching the video. Hopefully we picked up some tips and tricks when working with push style fittings. Remember, they are push style fittings. SHARKEBITE is the common name that many people refer to these as. SHARKEBITE is just a fitting brand. Thanks again. Hope you picked something up.